Bom dia. Good morning, guys, from the port area here of Rio de Janeiro. Check it out. We've got a fancy museum right ahead of us here, the Museu de Amanhã, the morning museum basically. And yeah, there we've got a fancy yacht. And I'm in the port area here of Rio, another area of the city which we haven't explored yet together. And it happens to be one of my last days here in the country, and I reckon that we should finish this Brazilian adventure on a good note. And similar to the Mexican series, today I want to make a special video. I've decided in today's video to name the 3 things I hate and the 3 things I love about Brazil. And in order to finish on a high and on a good note, because I love Brazil, I've decided to, in this video, start with one thing I hate about Brazil, then name a thing I love about Brazil, and then so on, switch between the things I love and hate. But I'm gonna start with one bad thing and finish with a good thing. Because I can already tell you that Brazil has joined the list of my favorite countries in the world, and I'll definitely be back. But as every country in the world, it also has its ups and downs, and it has a few downsides to it. So let's start with the first thing I don't like about Brazil. The first thing I don't like about this country is the prices of accommodation and transport. Compared to the other Latin American countries I've visited, Brazil is super expensive for a traveler. I mean, backpacking in Brazil is a lot more expensive than in other countries. The prices of hostels and of buses and national flights here are close actually to European prices, Western European prices that is. And I mean, fair enough, when it comes to hostels and accommodation, hotels, Airbnbs, it ain't more expensive than Mexico. But the major difference between Brazil and Mexico is that in Mexico you always get something for your money. In Mexico, when you go to an expensive hostel, it's gonna be clean, the food is gonna be good, the showers are gonna be clean, you're gonna sleep in a good bed, there won't be any bugs in your bedroom, the walls won't be rotten away. But here in Brazil that ain't the case. I've got to admit to you guys that as much as I enjoyed my time here in Brazil, I've slept in some real overpriced shitholes. Right guys, this is what you get here in Rio de Janeiro for 16 euros a night. Check it out. Get you this small dorm which you share with 7 other people. The beds are quite comfy, I've got to admit, but if you look at the walls here, the walls rotting away. So yeah, I reckon for 16 euros a night tells you what to expect from the prices of accommodation here in Rio. Also, in regards to national buses and flights, to give you an example, my bus from Sao Paulo down to Rio, when I came to Rio the first time, like a month ago at time of recording, cost me 50 euros. And the bus was a night bus of 6 hours, so not the longest bus journey, you know, and it was a national bus journey. 50 euros. I mean, in Argentina, my round trip, my flight from Buenos Aires down to Ushuaia, to the end of the world, which is about the same distance as flying from London to Lagos, Nigeria, cost me round trip 50 euros. So, fun fact, my bus from Sao Paulo to Rio which only took 6 hours, so not that far, not that long of a distance, cost the same as my round trip flight from Buenos Aires down to Ushuaia. So yeah, to make you guys understand, Brazil is a bit more costly, a bit more pricey, I should say, than the other countries here in Latin America, especially when it comes to accommodation and transport. Now it's time for the first thing I really love about Brazil. So we're going to switch in this video between the good notes and the bad notes, and we're going to hope that it's not going to start raining. Check it out. It's a hot day today, but kind of a cloudy one as well. But as we can see right here, it's the first thing I really love about Brazil, which is the food. And as you all know, one food in particular I love the most here in Brazil, which is açaí. Bom dia. Tem açaí?
Tem açaí aí,
É açaí natural?
Natural.
Pode ter com banana e granola.
Banana, granola, qualquer ingrediente que você quiser.
Só banana granola. So guys, as you all know, Brazil has got me addicted to açaí. I've had açaí practically nearly every day here in this country, and wherever you go, it's always delicious and it's always cheap. Even here in Rio, right next to this stylish museum here, which is of course a quite popular place for tourists to come and visit us. Even here, these street vendors are selling it for super cheap, you know. I mean, you got açaí here for €1, €2, €3, up to €5. This one is basically €5 for half a litre of açaí. So pretty nice. And yeah, I was talking about the food. I love Brazilian food, especially açaí. And I also love the concept of the buffet restaurants here. And I love the concept of weigh-in restaurants, they call it here basically. So you are going to go to a buffet restaurant, fill up your plate as much as you want, no matter what they've got to offer. You can basically, you find buffet restaurants that offer sushi, for instance, and you can just fill up your plate, and they've got an indiscriminate price per kilogram. So that's pretty nice, because I've never seen that in any other country, and I love that concept. And Brazilian food, apart from açaí as well, is pretty good. I like Brazilian food. It might not be as good as Mexican and Peruvian food, but in my opinion it comes in third place of the 6 countries I visited on this trip in Latin America. So Brazilian food, and especially açaí, are definitely a reason for you guys to come here. And also what I didn't tell you guys is that Brazilian food is not expensive. It's not in the same bracket as, in terms of prices, as accommodation and transport. Brazilian food is as cheap as Colombian food and Peruvian foods and Argentinian food. So in that regard, you don't have to worry when you come here. You can eat out here for like €2 to €3. Delicious meals, by the way. And yeah. So Brazilian food, first thing I love about Brazil. So I'm now going to destroy that açaí, and I'll see you guys in a bit. So, the second thing which I don't like about Brazil, guys, and which you have to keep in mind when you come to this country, is scammers. Brazil has many aggressive scammers. Of course, depending on the place you go, but mostly in the most touristic areas, there's many aggressive scammers. We've seen it in my last video, or one of my last videos, the one from Salvador. We've seen it up in Salvador. I mean, I loved Salvador. I really did. Salvador, in terms of the city, the architecture, and the beach, has actually been my favorite place of the places I've visited here in Brazil. But there's one thing which stops me from considering it my favorite place in Brazil, which is the scammers. It was the worst in Salvador, I've got to admit. They're everywhere, also in Rio. If you go to Christ Redeemer, I went there the first time I was here in Rio, a few weeks ago, and yeah, the scammers here are pretty mad. I mean, wherever you go in the world, wherever you go, where many tourists go, to any popular tourist spot, you'll find scammers. But I've got to admit that up in Mexico and in Colombia and also in Peru, which are also popular hotspots for tourists, the scammers are a lot less aggressive. They accept a no for an answer. But here in Brazil, that's not always the case. And I've personally never been to Morocco, so I can't judge Morocco, but as we all know, as anyone that is into traveling knows, Morocco has a reputation for very, very aggressive scammers. And Brazil, in some places you go, comes close to that. I mean, up in Salvador, the people that just come up to you, paint your arm, and then want money for you. Or, as we've seen in my video, walking past people with your camera is enough for them to ask you money. So those are things I really don't like about Brazil, because in the other Latin American countries I visited, that's not really the case. But I guess that also has to do with the fact that I'm gonna talk about in the final thing I don't like, in the final point I want to line out, which I don't like about Brazil. I always say that you've got to stand your grounds as a tourist or as a visitor, as a foreigner, when you come to this country and you get harassed by these aggressive scammers. You've got to stand your grounds. If they don't deserve any money from you, don't give them any money. I mean, it's always good to help people out, but it has to be, you know, the right people. If people just come up to you and want money from you for nothing, just, you know, just because you're a tourist, you have to stand your ground, because not everyone deserves your help. Wow, beautiful view from up here. Overlooking the port of Rio de Janeiro. Check it out, guys. And the perfect place to get to number 2 of things I love about Brazil and why you should come here, which is diversity. The diversity both in a cultural aspect and a natural aspect, a landscaping aspect. You've got so much to do here. So much biodiversity, so many things to explore, cultural diversity as well. I mean, the entire country, Brazil, is 5 times the size of Europe without Scandinavia. So you can imagine how massive this country is. You could spend a year in this country, only traveling Brazil, and not see everything this country has to offer. So, Brazil feels like an entire continent on its own. But the people from the south, the north, the west, the Amazon, despite looking all different, I mean, in the south and the west, people are white, just like in Europe. It feels like being in Argentina or in Europe. Then in the north, and especially in the northeast, in Salvador, as we've seen, there's practically only Africans. Then in Sao Paulo, there's many Asians. Sao Paulo has both the biggest Asian community the biggest Japanese community outside of Japan, and the biggest Italian community outside of Italy, which is pretty astonishing. And then you've got the Amazon, obviously, where we haven't been yet in Brazil. And despite this incredible diversity, and of course cultural diversity as well, people are united by 2 things: the language, Portuguese, and football. When the national team plays at the World Cup or the Copa America, the entire country, whether indigenous, black or white, whether from the northeast, whether from the south, or whether from the Amazon, whether from Sao Paulo or Rio, comes together under one flag and under one shirt. So, this country has so much to offer, you've got to love it. I mean, I've seen some of the prettiest places of my life here. The Iguazu Falls, one of the prettiest places I've seen in my life. And yeah, Salvador, the city of Salvador, one of the prettiest cities I've seen in my life. So this country has something for everyone. It's not just carnival and beaches and party. It has something for everything, for everyone. So you should absolutely come here, and I know for sure that I'll be back in Brazil to explore more, because even though I've seen quite a lot of it already, it feels like I've only scratched the surface. So yeah, after this I'll be back in the future, and you should come here as well. Come to Brazil, guys. It's absolutely worth it. The 26 states of Brazil and the diversity that they offer are definitely a reason to come here, and one of the main reasons, one of the main things I love about Brazil. But apart from the language and football, there's one more thing that all of these 26 states of Brazil, and especially the big cities, share and all have in common. And that brings me to the third and final thing I hate or I don't like about Brazil, which is the massive social disparities between the rich and the poor. I mean, we've seen it in Rio. I was living in a favela. We've also seen it in my last video here in Rio, in the area of Lapa. I'm telling you honestly, guys, the area of Lapa in central Rio is one of the roughest, not only of Latin America, but in the entire world that I've seen in my life. And this is due to two things: the massive disparities in Brazil between the rich and the poor, like apartheid. It's like similar to an apartheid state, basically. And also, yeah, the issues that the country has with racism, because I've seen this when I was living in the favela, and people that live in the favela tell you the same thing. I mean, here in Rio, it is emphasized by the fact that up in the favelas, which surround the entire city, you'll find mostly, not only, but mostly, like 95% of the people that live in the favelas are black people, and 95% of the people that live in the richer areas, especially down at the beach, closer to the coast, like Copacabana, Ipanema, and Leblon, the richer areas of town, are mostly white people, white Brazilians. And racism here is a thing. I mean, a few years ago, one of the most racist presidents that ever existed, Mr. Bolsonaro, who is called the Brazilian version of Trump, was in charge here. And the fact that somebody like Bolsonaro can get into power in a country like Brazil just showcases the issues that this country has with racism. And yeah, racism is one of the reasons for the massive, disproportions between the rich and the poor here. Because there's people here in Brazil that live a normal life, like people in the West, that can afford to travel, that can afford to go out during weekends, that live a pretty normal life. But then you've got the other end of the country, the other half of the country, which, is living on the streets, living in complete poverty, is ignored by the government. And yeah, for example, in Vidigal, in the favela where I've been living, I've been told that basically once a year the local government, the local administration of Rio is coming to take the trash away, Here I am in a residential area close to the poor area, and as you can see, it's pretty clean, no trash lying in the streets, but that's not the case in other parts of the city. And yeah, to be fair as well, I've not seen a country with that many junkies and homeless people on the streets than Brazil. And this is mainly due to the fact that these people just got ignored by the government, no help for them. And there's a major issue that this country has. And I'm not going to say that Brazil, like many vloggers are going to tell you, it's dangerous, or many governmental institutions in the West are going to tell you that Brazil is dangerous. It's not more dangerous than many countries in Europe, especially Western Europe I've visited. But yes, I've got to admit, it is a bit sketchier than all the other Latin American countries I've visited. It's sketchier than Mexico, Peru, Argentina and Colombia. Now, let's hop on an Uber and finish this video, and finish it on a good note. Finish it with the last thing, the major thing I love about Brazil, and the major reason for you guys to come here. Right guys, we've made it to one of the prettiest spots here in the center of Rio, the Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon. There's a massive lagoon here in the area of Leblon, where we've already been when we came to Rio the first time. And I reckon with a view of the magnificent Christ behind us, which you can see up there, the wonder of the world, Christ Redeemer. I hope my camera picks it up. I reckon it does. I think it's the perfect spot to end the video and to end this Brazilian adventure. And to get to my final point, the final thing which I absolutely love about Brazil and why you should absolutely come to this magnificent country, which is the people. Last but not least, what I love about Brazil is the people. The people of Brazil are super friendly, super hospitable and super welcoming. And Brazil is one of the easiest countries to make friends as a solo traveler. And despite what I've said about the scammers, it not feeling as safe as Colombia and Mexico, Brazil, yes, is blessed with some of the best people in the world. When you come here, you don't have to be scared. You've got to take your precautions, as everywhere else in the world. But people always paint, like, especially in the West, a dark picture of Brazil that, you know, it's super sketchy, super dangerous, you get robbed when you come here on your own. And I gotta tell you guys, it's not true. Brazilians are up there with the best people in the world. And they are, last but not least, one of the many things I love about this country. I could have named many more things that I love about this country, but I'll stick to the 3 things rule. And yeah, the people of Brazil are flipping legends. I've made many friends here, and I'll be back here. I'll be back in this country in the future, maybe even the near future, who knows. And with that being said, guys, it's goodbye for me from Brazil. Unfortunately, I'll be heading back to Europe in a few days. So that's it for this Brazilian adventure for now. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next adventure, somewhere else in the world, probably somewhere in Europe. But we'll be back in Latin America soon, guys. As you know, I love this region of the world, and yeah, Latin America feels home to me, and Brazil does as well. So, with Christ Redeemer in the background, it's adiós, ciao, Brasil, hasta logo, e muito obrigado. And Brazil, highly recommend it. I'll see you very soon, guys. Take care. Love you all.